Okay, we're here with Jonathan Hill, and it's the New York International Antiquarian Book Fair, April 3rd through the 6th here at the Armory. And Jonathan, why don't you just bring us up to speed on your youth, siblings, what your mom and dad did, where you went to school, etc.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, and my father was an investment banker. And as you know very well, because you were an important source for my father, he was an important book collector.
Absolutely.
And I have one sister and of course a mother, and we grew up in the suburbs. And I went to a private school in New Jersey, and then I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and then I got going in the book business.
Just out of school? Just out
Well,
of school?
no, it's more complicated than that. My father, Kenneth Hill, got me a summer job in between school years when I was 19 in a rare bookstore, John Howell Books. He said, maybe you'd like to work in a rare bookstore this summer. And because it was in San Francisco, I said, sure. And I'd always liked to read books, so it was, it made a little sense. And of course, Warren paid me about $30 a month or something. Yeah.
Some ridiculous salary.
But after that summer, I knew that I wanted to be a rare bookseller. So I went back to college the next year, next fall, and I called up the Rosenbach Foundation. And I said, which was this rare book library in Philadelphia, in downtown Philadelphia. And I called up and I said, I'm interested in rare books. Do you need any part-time help? And they said, yes, you can become a tour guide.
Oh, that's fun.
So I suddenly became an expert in American furniture, of which really I never knew anything about. But I did have a slight feel for the books. I mean, I was just beginning, but I could talk a little more intelligently about the rare books that I gave on the tour. I also moved furniture around and, just did whatever they needed to do. And that continued all the way through college. And that was really great because the director at that time, who became infamous, was Clive Driver. Yes. Yes, but he was very nice to me. And I was sort of, he introduced me to people. He proposed me for the Grolier Club when I was 21. I mean, Bill Reese and I both became members at age 21.
I know.
And he was nice to me and, encouraged me to continue. So he later became infamous by having looted the Rosenbach Foundation. But that's another story.
Yeah, for another day.
Yeah, right. And so then the next summer, I didn't want to go back to San Francisco. I mean, Warren was kind of a tough boss. I mean, he was not nice to his employees. And even though my father was spending a great deal of money,
That didn't make any difference.
it didn't make any difference. But it was a great experience having worked for him.
Yep.
And so I worked for Seven Gables Bookshop the next summer. Where there were two masters, Mike Papantonio, who said about 10 words to me the whole summer, but then John Cohn, who was obviously a frustrated teacher who wouldn't shut up, and that was great because he would, get out 6 copies of Moby Dick and explain.
Show you the difference.
Yeah, so show me the difference and why, it was just great. And I did whatever they wanted me to do, and I remember once Mr. Papantonio asked me to make a description of a group of manuscripts, and I did, and he said, time to learn how to do this, because obviously I had no idea how to do it. And then John Cohn asked me to offer a bunch of A. Edward Newtons to, it turned out to be Bob Fleck. Bob Fleck was a chemical engineer at that time, and later become a very great book seller and publisher. And so I made up a list, and I wrote a business letter to Bob Fleck, and John Cohn said, Jonathan, it's time to learn how to write a business letter. So I began to,
You learned.
I learned. And I saw a lot of books because that was a real, I mean, the place was a dump, but what a great treasure house.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah. And then I began to start working part-time for Clarence Wolfe at McManus in Philadelphia when he was in downtown Philadelphia.
What time frame?
Well, I guess that was about my junior year.
What was the year?
Oh, so let's see, I graduated in college in 1974, so it was about 1973.
Okay.
And that was really good because at that time I was interested in literature because that's what I sort of knew from being, having read books. And Clarence sort of let me run the literature department. I mean, I couldn't I mean, it seems unbelievable today, but I guess I did all right because he never fired me, and that was a real good experience because I saw a lot. I mean, he had a lot of books. A lot of books went through the place, and it was a real good experience for me. And I stayed there. I worked there for I stayed actually after 1 year more after college, and working for him, and then Jake Zeitlin offered me a job out in Los Angeles. And that's, so I went out there in 1975 and I worked for him for 3 years. And that's where I learned science and medicine because he was,
One of his
yes,
specialties.
that was two of his great specialties. And Jake was, first, he was an important cultural figure in Los Angeles and all of California. And he was a great bookseller and a great person, a great character. He was very busy. He wasn't the greatest boss because he was busy. He was making deals and
being
but
jerk.
yeah, but you would watch him because he was a master, and also he's one of the most charming salesmen. I mean, he was a genuinely charming salesman. It was all genuine, but he was a salesman, and he'd started, of course, as a door-to-door encyclopedia bookseller in the Depression. Carrying essentially a carpet bag around. And so he taught me sales techniques and sales tricks, too, that I still use today. And so that was really, that was the most influential experience working for Jake because I watched him. I began to learn about the books, the science and medicine books. And I can't say that I was overly fond of living in Los Angeles. I grew up in New Jersey, and I always wanted to really live in New York City. So I left Jake in the end of April 78. Started my own business on May 1st, 1978. And I lived in Los Angeles 1 year before I had enough money to go back to rent an apartment in New York City. And that was on East 77th Street. I've always worked from home. I never wanted to have a shop. I realized that I was not a good face-to-face salesman. In fact, that's why I find book fairs rather kind of torture for me.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah. It's not a relaxed atmosphere. And so I've always worked at home and had made catalogs. I'm up to catalog 208, so I make 5 or 6 a year. And I lived on 77th Street for a year, and then I had enough money to buy an apartment on 83rd and West End Avenue. Mm-hmm. And then in 1990, moved to where I am now on 75th and West End Avenue. And it's very little in some ways has changed in my business. I still make lots of catalogs, still work at home. I only now do one book fair a year, which is the New York Book Fair. And I do that, it's a great book fair, first of all, but it's also an easy book fair. Yeah. The idea of packing on, because my wife and I are, we're just a little family business, and the idea of packing up all the books to send them to California and then unpacking them and repacking, it's too much.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I do everything. I pack the books. I have described every single book, which is now about 35,000 books. Wow. And Megumi, my wife, has started, now that our kids are in college, has joined in, and we're started to deal in antique Japanese books, which has been a very interesting adventure. And I'm happy to say it worked out real well. We're doing well selling stuff, finding stuff and selling stuff. And it's so different from Western books. And the books are complicated in a very different way than we're used to. Yeah. That's been a real great education for me, and she's gotten good at it, happily. She started working at the Met in the Japanese department and for Ken Soner at the library because she knows stuff. Yeah. So that's been great.
Did you learn Japanese?
I know 20 polite expressions and 2 impolite expressions, and that's it.
And that's about it.
Yeah, I know French, I know German, and I didn't want to tackle another one, especially such a different
Japanese is a very difficult language.
Right, yes, right, yeah.
And it's read like Hebrew.
And I'm married to someone who speaks perfect Japanese, so.
Yeah, and she speaks good English too, so.
Yes, perfect English, so.
It's Do you ever do any of the Japanese book fairs?
Yeah, we do. We did, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, there was an international book
Yeah.
fair, and I think they have another international book fair celebrating, I think, perhaps the 50th or
The ABAA.
yeah, ABAJ 50th. Well, it's some big anniversary year, and I mean, if all is well, we'll do it again, even though the Japanese market is essentially
Dead.
kaput. Uh, just out of, well, we like to go there, and out of loyalty, because we've done so much with the great Japanese dealers over the years that we like to do it, and they're nice. It's a nice place to go to.
It was a lot. It was a lot different when I went over there in 1960.
You went there in 1960.
Yeah,
Wow.
1960.
My goodness gracious.
1961, and then we used to go there 2 or 3 times a
Yeah.
year for years and years and years. But as the market began to slow down and go down to nothing, I stopped going.
Yeah.
But I've always enjoyed the Japanese book trade, and the way they do business in Japan is quite a bit of difference than we do.
Yeah,
business
right. Yeah,
here.
yeah. But once you figure out, I mean, you know, as my wife said, when a Japanese dealer responds to your question, you know, they say, "We will think about it." That means no.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can't say no, but
Yeah.
it's different. But it's been, you know, a wonderful place to sell books for a long time. And every so often, we do sell a big book over there. It surprises me, but you know, there still are some people or some libraries that want to buy big books.
I just got a catalog from Subanso.
Yeah, right.
With the all economics.
Right,
and
right,
so
yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So how old are your kids?
We have 2 kids. One is 20 and one will be 19 tomorrow.
Boy and girl,
2 boys.
2 boys.
And strangely enough, our older son, Yoshi, is showing signs of being interested in rare books.
Oh, that's great.
And I have no dynastic ambitions. I always was careful to introduce everybody who passed through to our kids and talk about my business and stuff, but just so they would know what I do.
Right.
But our older son, last summer was an intern at the Grolier Club, and he goes to Hamilton College, and he's working in the rare book department. And then this coming summer, he'll be a junior intern at the Library of Congress in the rare book division. And I don't, you know, it's kind of interesting that seems to be quite interested in all this. So
Maybe he has library intentions as opposed to
who knows?
bookselling.
But I'm thrilled that you know, and he worked at you know, in the basement of Thomas Scheller, arranging books. And he knows Latin and French really well.
Oh, he does.
So
Well, that's
you know, he's
important.
kind of useful. And he also liked going out to lunch with the Japanese book trade, you know, for 4 hours and
or more.
yeah, or more. So
A Botfield kind of lunch.
yes, exactly. He doesn't understand that doesn't happen every day, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world. But,
No, it doesn't. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the internet.
yeah.
You have a strong presence, a regular. What does the internet mean to Jonathan Hill Books?
Well, it's been great, although I think it makes some collectors kind of stupid, but it's been great in lots of ways because suddenly people can find the books they want in a very organized and simple way. And I've sold some very, very expensive books on the internet. I've sold a $200,000 book on the internet to a well-known collector, but he didn't know me, and he didn't know I had the book he was looking for. And it was all kind of simple and pleasant. And once he found out who I was, he began to believe that, you know, he could trust paying me and all that. And also a lot of books that I sort of had given up hope on suddenly become saleable. And so we have our own web page, and that works real well. But you know, with Google Analytics, you can see how many hits you have a day or a week, and it's, you know, it's like 15 visits a day, and most of them leave after getting to the home page, because I got there by mistake. Yeah. And but you know, things happen, and it's kind of beautiful. You know, you can sell books that. It's just a new, wonderful way. And when I worked for Jake, you remember that shop? He had a selection of secondhand books, and once we were standing there, and he pulled down some, you know, ordinary secondhand book, and he said to me, "The only reason I haven't sold this book is because I didn't find the person who wants to buy it. There's a customer for every book, and you just got to be patient." And the internet has made all that possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a buyer's market.
Yeah,
and a race to the bottom.
Now, it has some downsides. It makes a lot of people quite stupid about comparing prices. And the trade has become very sensitive about trying to only have the only copy that's on the internet. And I've become very aware of that, and I try to have genuinely rare books or such a superior copy of a book where there are many copies on the internet that it's desirable, and hopefully that will get through to the customers who look at the
The
descriptions.
best, the only, cheapest.
Yeah, and I can't do the cheapest because
That
therein
doesn't
lies
apply to
poverty.
you.
Yeah.
That doesn't apply to the kind
Yeah,
of books
yeah,
you deal with.
yeah.
How big an inventory are you carrying these days?
Well, it's about 1,000 books. It's not much. I keep on trying to get it bigger, but I in recent years, I've gotten away from the cheaper books, but I still love $100 books. I
Yeah,
mean, if it's an interesting book, I can't resist.
I have that same problem.
You know that. You know that too.
It's-
But I try to have more and more expensive books because, a $500,000 book is easier to sell than lots of $5,000 books or $500 books or $50 books.
But it's still fun. It's still fun to.
You look at my catalogs. I have
I
lots
know.
of books for $500 because they're fun and they're interesting, and someone should want them. If I make a good enough description,
Yeah.
someone will want them.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
What about your wife? Is she computer literate as well, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, she's pretty good with a computer, and the whole Japanese typing in Japanese.
Yeah.
Apple computers has made it very simple because you have the selection of the three alphabets, Japanese alphabets, and that's been a very powerful tool for her. But for the Japanese books, she does the research, and then we sit down together and describe the book together in English. Because our real market for Japanese books is in the West, not in Japan.
Yeah.
Not yet. We're not important enough yet to have books that are for Japanese libraries or private collectors. But we're getting there.
No, I would have thought you would have been there already. With some
Well,
of the
I don't know.
faces.
I don't know. But we haven't really ever sold a Japanese book in Japan yet. But the ones we are dealing with are really for our customers in the West, it seems. But who knows?
Is your customer base, is it, what percentage do you think goes to institutions, and what percentage to other dealers, what percentage to collectors? Can you sort of like break it down just?
It changes from day to day, month to month, and year to year, that it's impossible to say.
Yeah.
And I don't analyze it like that. I mean, it's like when I do my bookkeeping, I never add up how much I sold at the end of the year. I don't care. All I care about is whether I made enough money to, pay my kids' tuition bills and, put food on the table and things like that. So I don't really care about those kinds of factors. All I know is that I'm open to all kinds of possibilities, and happily, something seems to happen with some frequency, through the trade or privately or with libraries. A library just called me up 2 weeks ago. They said, we're looking for a 14th millionth volume.
Wait.
And is this book available? I'm like, it was a $100,000 book. And I said, yes. And so I said, okay, well, we'll buy it. This is a book I'd sold about, $2,000 a year for 20 years. But there's the power of the internet.
Yeah.
And the librarian, I know her a little bit, and it's very nice.
It's very important that there's a relationship between the bookseller and the eventual purchaser.
Well, yes, and of course on the internet that makes it hard to a degree.
Yeah.
But I try to personalize my responses and try to engage people and try to draw them out and try to give them a little bit of me as well. So we do have a relationship, even though it's long distance.
What do you see as some of the great challenges we face in the next decade or so as booksellers?
Well, the shortage of books. They get more and more expensive. I mean, when I think of my capital investment, it's a lot. And happily, books for me have been a good investment, meaning I can buy them and sell them. The capital requirements are really kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
And also, this problem that's occurred with stolen books and forged books, and now the export license problems, getting books out of Italy in a correct way.
Yeah.
You know, in the old days, every Italian bookseller, every northern Italian bookseller had a cousin who lived in Lugano in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And you get the parcel from Lugano, and you'd send the money to Lugano.
Yeah.
And now that's all come to an end.
Yep.
Happily, I mean, in a way, that's great.
I think so, too.
That's correct. But to get export licenses, the Italians are not as efficient as the French or the British. And you know, you can accidentally buy a book in Italy and never get an export license. And so it's condemned to live in Italy.
Well, I don't know. Condemning to live in Italy isn't such a
Yeah,
bad
but
thing.
well, yeah, well, but you know what I
people.
mean. I'd like to get that book out and try to sell it. But
Have
so
you had any experience buying and selling stuff in Spain and Portugal?
very little.
Very little.
Very little. Yeah. I mean, I know all the Spanish dealers, and they're quite correct. Portugal, I mean, Richard Raymer always seems to control that pretty well.
Yeah.
Although I do have a customer from whom to whom I've sold several books, and recently I bought a real good book from him. So.
Other than the few people that you worked for, have there been any other mentors, people that have had an influence on you as a person and as a bookseller?
Well, the closest relationship I have in the book trade is with Thomas Scheller, the bookshop in Paris. And his father, Bernard Clavroy, the father, and I, we hit it off for some reason. I mean, he basically is not so pro-American, but he liked me.
Yeah.
And so we became really great friends. And when his son Stefan was 17, he came to live with me one summer to perfect his English and work a little bit in the rare book world with me. And now Stefan took over the business, and so it's the next generation. And now, in fact, our older son has gone to work for them, and a couple summers ago. So it continues, and they are really great booksellers. They find lots of books, and we buy a lot of books together, and we go on vacation together. We have just a very happy time. Our two families.
That's great.
Yeah,
It's
that's the nicest, the fullest relationship I have. But you know, the Italians, the Progliasco family, you know, lots of the German dealers. I mean, that's what I like about the book business.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from a couple of stinkers, the book dealers are really nice, and they're my friends, and it's been a wonderful series of relationships, and I've really enjoyed the trade.
This is a good point to tell you that we've gone through 30 minutes already.
Oh, good.
It flies, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It does fly. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Okay, great. And my hands are freezing because I'm nervous, but anyway.
Don't be nervous. Nothing to be nervous about.